Hello, and if I can manage it, this will be a short introduction to my newer Augustine book, which looks like that. This is Reason, Authority, and the Healing of Desire in the Writings of Augustine. It's something like a sequel to this book, which was originally my PhD dissertation. I hope the camera is holding it properly. The Conversion and Therapy of Desire in Augustine's Cassicacan Dialogues, or rather, Conversion and Therapy of Desire. Augustine's Theology of Desire in the Cassicacan Dialogues subtitle. All right, this book was about Augustine's theology of desire in his earliest surviving writings, which are also his earliest Christian writings. And there are 4 of the Cassicacan Dialogues, and we'll get back to that in a moment. You could think of this book, Reason, Authority, and the Healing of Desire in the Writings of Augustine, as a sequel. Here we look at Augustine's teaching on desire in the early books, and then we look at his teaching on desire in various other books. It's something like that. Well, it is that, but there are more aspects to this. Let me see if I can comment on some of the other aspects. First of all, let's briefly review the problem of desire. Human beings are not happy, and the reason we're not happy, or at least one of the big reasons, is that we want more than this world can give us. We desire money, power, fame, physical pleasure, long life. We want health and long life for ourselves and people we care about, and death takes everyone. And we never have as much money as we want. We never have as much physical pleasure as we want, et cetera, et cetera. We're always dissatisfied. Human beings are always dissatisfied unless they found some way to move past the dissatisfaction. But dissatisfaction is pretty much universal. It's ubiquitous. Suffering because of desire, or at least some degree of a lack in human happiness because we do not have what we desire, characterizes human life, and it's ubiquitous, or darn close to ubiquitous. So what do? The Buddhist approach is to reduce desire, get rid of it altogether. It's also the approach of Stoicism in ancient Western philosophy. The Epicureans are similar, and some other traditions in ancient Western philosophy do much the same thing. Another approach is to redirect desire towards something more satisfying. That would be the approach of Platonism, that would be the approach of Augustine, that would be the approach of C.S. Lewis, that would be the approach of Islamic Sufi medieval philosophers, and the approach of the Bhagavad Gita in the Hindu tradition. And then another approach is to try to change the world, make it satisfy our desires. That's the approach of some early modern philosophers like Machiavelli, Descartes, John Locke, and others. Okay, so Augustine is drawing in part from the these pre-modern philosophers, these ancient Western philosophers who were giving a therapy for desire. Therapy for desire. That's a phrase from Martha Nussbaum's book, The Therapy of Desire. The Therapy of Desire is Nussbaum's work about what perspectives on desire and what techniques for healing desire are used by schools like Stoicism, Epicureanism, and some others. And so Augustine is drawing from this tradition, but he's also drawing, of course, from the scriptures as well as he can understand them, and from Christian church tradition, and to some extent from other church fathers. And the result is a uniquely Christian perspective on desire. And you can talk of a therapy for desire like Martha Nussbaum talking about the Stoics or the Epicureans when you're talking about Augustine. But you can also talk about other terminology like conversion. Desire must be converted to the love of God. And this is a teaching on desire that does have some connections to these various pagan philosophies and so on, but it does also have some distinctly Christian elements. So we're talking about that. Now, what else are we doing in this book? I'm trying to understand Augustine on his own terms in Reason, Authority, and the Healing of Desire in the Writings of Augustine. This is the thing Augustine talks about. This is the thing Augustine won't shut up about. This is the thing Augustine talks about on pretty much every page. This is what's important to him. This is what he emphasizes as much as anything, maybe more than anything, certainly more than most things. Getting our desires straightened out is what Augustine writes about the most. And while there are any number of delightful books about various topics in Augustine, There aren't actually very many that focus on this thing that he focused on the most, at least by comparison to everything else. Now let's briefly glance at the back cover. Not that you probably couldn't find a copy of this on the publisher's website or perhaps some bookseller's website. Okay, in this book, Reason, Authority, and the Healing of Desire in the Writings of Augustine, we're looking at a cross-section of Augustine's books. Maybe it's better to say books because we're not dealing with his sermons here. All in good time. I'm working on that book as well. But in this book, Reason, Authority, and the Healing of Desire in the Writings of Augustine, we're looking at Augustine's teaching on desire in this cross-section of his treatises, his other books. Now, there are two different strategies or techniques or methods for pursuing the truth that you can find in Augustine. You can distinguish them in Augustine. You can't really separate them. I think every book that deals with one method is going to deal with another to some extent. That's what I find. Not entirely separate. They're meant to be integrated in the same person's pursuit of truth. In the pursuit of truth that should occupy a person's life, both methods are involved. Nevertheless, there is a distinction between the method of reason and the method of authority in the pursuit of truth. And you can identify which method is somewhat more emphasized in a particular writing of Augustine. And hence, I distinguish between 4 books in Augustine that emphasize reason or rely on reason somewhat more and authority somewhat less, and 4 books that rely on authority somewhat more and reason somewhat less. And then there are certain topics. Back to Castigliacum Dialogues. The first of the Castigliacum Dialogues is Contra Academicos, against the academics. It is largely dealing with apologetics. It's a defense of the Christian faith. The second book of the Castigliacum Dialogues is De Beata Vita, on the happy life. It's very much dealing with ethics. Third book of the Castigliacum Dialogues, De Ordine, is dealing with metaphysics and to some extent with the problem of evil. It's trying to help us understand how we should think about the nature of the universe God created in such a way as to account for evil and the appearance of disorder in creation. And then the fourth book of the Castigliacum Dialogues is Soliloquia, or Soliloquies, and it is an investigation of God and the soul. So these are 4 topics that occupy Augustine's first 4 books: apologetics, ethics, problem of evil, and you can find that he focuses on these topics in a lot of his other writings. And you can find that these are primary foci of certain writings, like for apologetics, these 2 books; for ethics, these 2 books; problem of evil, these 2 books; God and the soul, these 2 books. And also, those 2 books use different methods. And for each set of these 2 books, we have different methods. And so in this way, we have this nice cross-section of Augustine's writings. De Religione, for apologetics, using primarily the method of reason. This is the book on the true religion, using the method of reason primarily. In studying ethics, De Natura Boni, on the nature of the good. De Libero Arbitrio, studying the problem of evil, using the methodology of reason. This is the book on the free choice of the will. And then on the teacher, De Magistro, is meditation on God and the soul, relying primarily on reason. Going backwards, Confessions, his most famous book, and I would say his best book, at least based on what I've read. I haven't read everything in Augustine. Few, if any, have. Actually, I think I may have met one guy who did. I am not that guy. I have not read everything in Augustine, but from what I read, I would happily classify the Confessions as his greatest book. Confessiones is a reflection on God and the soul, relying somewhat more on authority than on reason. And Quiridion, or the Handbook, is a reflection on the problem of evil and other matters, relying mostly on authority. De Bono Coniugali, on the good of marriage, is relying on primarily the method of authority and dealing with ethics. De Utilitate Credendi, on the usefulness of believing, is relying primarily with, or at least dealing primarily with authority, and is dealing with apologetics, or the defense of the faith. So this is my cross-section of Augustine's writings, and I'm looking at Augustine's theology of desire therein. And what do we find? Here is a short excerpt. I don't think it will be any copyright violation if I just share a few of these paragraphs. These are the major pointers of Augustine's theology of desire that I find in these particular books. First, unsurprisingly, Non-physical reality is better. It's nobler than physical reality. And what sort of non-physical realities are the most important? Well, God, of course. God is the greatest good. Summum bonum quo non superius est, Deus est, I think is the line from, I think it's the first sentence of De Natura Boni. Summum bonum quo non superius est, Deus est. The greatest good than which there is none superior is God. But also, same book, rational spirits are a great good. Not the greatest good, God is the greatest good. But a rational spirit, like the human soul, is the second greatest good that exists. And our loves and desires should be ordered according to reality. We should love that which really is the greatest good the most, and we should love rational spirits more than we love anything less than they are. We should, however, love them less than God, of course. This is a reasoned analysis of the love of God and neighbor, which of course is also the biblical command. And you'll find Augustine giving a reasoned analysis of the love of God and souls, and you'll find him giving an appeal to the authority of the scriptures on the love of God and neighbor. And these are converging moral accounts. The love of God and neighbor as commanded in the Bible, the love of God and souls as following from a reasoned analysis of metaphysics. This book being a fine sample of that. They converge, they come together. That's the Augustinian way of thinking. Okay, epistemology and ethics are never separated. This is the study of knowledge. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, and ethics is the study of right and wrong, and they go together. Right loving is a necessary condition for right knowing. If you want to know God, you must also love properly, specifically love God and neighbor. Now, a good Christian analysis of desire is going to follow the Christian worldview, as we've been taught by good folks like Dr. David Noggle of Dallas Baptist University. The Christian worldview follows major points of creation, fall, and redemption. These are the creational aspects of Augustine's theology of desire. But a good theology of desire is not going to leave out the fall. It's not going to leave out sin. What are the major points on desire and sin? Well, first, sin is desiring lesser goods as if they were greater. Also, our desires are corrupted by pride, and this is all a very, very serious problem. Third point of the Christian worldview, redemption. A good theology must have an account of redemption. How is sin healed? How is it overcome? How is it forgiven? Augustine does employ some concepts from Platonic philosophy, but he is always relying on Christ. There are certain therapies that heal our desires, using that language from Martha Nussbaum. There are certain practices you can do that will help to heal desire, and these do align to some extent with the therapies of philosophers like the Stoics or the Epicureans, but it's all useless without grace. We need God to convert our hearts to God. God's commands and the authority of Christ are necessary for the conversion of our desires to God. There are some remarkable passages on that subject in the Confessions, for example. The healing of desire is not to be sought through philosophical therapy exclusively or even primarily. The healing of desire is to be sought through prayer, context of the church, in the community of the Orthodox believers, and observing the sacramental practices of the church. So that's desire in Augustine's theology of creation, fall, and redemption, but also we want to look briefly at his systematic theology. Desire has everything to do with the incarnation. The incarnation reconciles human beings to God partially because in it, Christ teaches us what we ought to love. Also, his humility heals our pride. Pride, the inordinate love of oneself and of one's glory. This is maybe the most significant corruption of desire. The incarnation of Christ is the humility that will cure this corruption of human desire. Thanks to original sin, we've got built-in problems with our desires. We have a tendency to not understand what is right, and even when we do, we have difficulty acting according to it. And we have a tendency to sinful desire even when we do know what is right. Now, this corruption of desire in human nature is actually passed on through disordered desire. And as may not surprise you, Augustine talks about sex sometimes. The corruption of human desire is passed on through human nature because the same corruption is manifest in the act by which a human being comes into existence, a new human being from other human beings, i.e. sex, which involves the disorder of desire that it involves. Physical pleasures unbridled by reason. That tends to happen in sex, and that's part of how the corruption of human nature is passed on. Now, Jesus, note well, Jesus was not conceived in this way. He inherits a total human nature from his mother, but without its corruption, because there was no sin passed on in his conception, because his conception was the virgin conception, without sex, without concupiscentia, the concupiscence or the disorderly grasping for human pleasures. All right, 2 more points. More on sex. Human desire tends to go wrong sexually. Marriage is an institution or state, let's just say a thing, to cover all the angles. Marriage is a thing ordained by God for dealing with these desires. With human desire that has gone wrong sexually, God deals by marriage. Marriage treats the symptoms. It brings good rather than harm out of this sin, out of the desire, out of these sinful, out of the phenomenon of sinful human sexual desire. Marriage brings good rather than harm. And marriage helps to heal it. Marriage transforms corrupt sexual desire into the love of God and the love of neighbor. Also, it provides for automatic forgiveness of various sins of not being able to control ourselves in the context of marriage. This is the focus of De Bono Conjugale, a lovely little book. Okay, finally, Augustine doesn't just say, love God and forget about everything else. No, we're supposed to love God more and love what God created only in reference to God, and always subordinate love for creation to the love of God. But when we love God rightly, we're actually freed to rightly love other things as well. Created goods are less good than God, but when we love God properly, the soul is anchored. We are kept from going astray, even when we love finite goods, if we love God, the greatest good, the infinite good, properly. When we love God properly, we are freed for loving God. Sorry, when we love God properly, we are freed for loving other things in the right way. Thus says Augustine, and thus I explain in Reason, Authority, and the Healing of Desire in the writings of Augustine. Now, these books are very good. I strongly recommend them. Let me think. Off the top of my head, you can even find public domain free translations at places like newadvent.org for several of them. I'm not I can't remember off the top of my head. At least half of them will have public domain free translations, and they're very affordable translations, at least in English. Many of these books, and any number of other languages, though I'm sorry to say not all the languages have had Augustine's books translated. All right. The originals are the ones I'd recommend the most. But I would also recommend this book for people interested in getting an introduction to these other books, or an introduction to Augustine's theology of desire overall, or even just introduction to Augustine. This book, I think, would be very helpful. Let me think. What else do I need to say about this? So I recommend this book. It's more expensive, I'm afraid, than my other Augustine book, though you may be able to get it through a local university library or something like that. And I do recommend it for those reasons. However, I do recommend the books of Augustine themselves more strongly. Don't let me do all your reading for you. Let me help you. If it helps, I hope it helps. But I recommend reading the original books for yourself as much as possible. Thanks for watching.